There is a quiet truth most people never learn. It is not that they fail to imagine a better life. It is that they cannot hold the image long enough for life to reorganize around it. Almost everyone has seen it, the future version of themselves. The life with more freedom, more stability, more calm control. But they see it for a moment, then reality interrupts. Bills arrive. Doubt speaks. Emotion rise, and the image dissolves. This audiobook is not about visualization as fantasy. It is about visualization as discipline. Because seeing something in your mind is easy. Holding it when nothing around you agrees is rare. And that difference changes everything. Most people think manifestation happens through desire. It doesn't. It happens through consistency of inner direction. When an image is held calmly, repeatedly, without emotional desperation, the nervous system begins to reorganize. Behavior changes quietly. Decisions shift without force. And life follows. Not magically. Inevitably. This is why some people seem to move forward, while others stay stuck, even though they read the same books, hear the same ideas, and claim to want the same things. The difference is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not even belief. It is the ability to remain internally aligned while the outside world remains unchanged. This audiobook is designed for night listening. When resistance is low and the subconscious is receptive, not to excite you, not to convince you, but to stabilize the image you already carry inside. If you listen passively, nothing will happen. If you listen repeatedly, something will shift. Because the goal is not to imagine harder. The goal is to imagine steadier, to hold one image without arguing with it, to stop reacting to temporary evidence, to become the kind of person whose inner direction does not fluctuate. When that happens, the phrase becomes real. See it in your mind. Hold it in your hand. Not because the universe rewards wishing, but because reality obeys order. And order always begins within. Now relax. Breathe slowly. And listen. We begin with the real problem why most people see the future and then lose it. Most people don't fail because they lack vision. They fail because they cannot stay with it. For a brief moment, clarity appears. A picture forms in the mind. A better life feels possible. And then, almost immediately, it disappears. Not because it wasn't real, but because the mind is not trained to hold still. This is the part no one teaches. Seeing an image is not the skill. Staying aligned with it is. The human mind is designed to respond to the present environment. Noise, urgency, emotion, distraction, these are its natural magnets. Without discipline, the mind drifts toward whatever is loudest, closest, or most emotionally charged. That is why most people lose their vision the moment life speaks back. A bill arrives. A comment lands. A delay happens. And the image collapses. Not because it was false, but because the nervous system interpreted discomfort as danger. This is where imagination dies for most people. They confuse resistance with reality. But resistance is not evidence against the image. It is evidence that the image is challenging the old identity. The mind always defends the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. Your current life, no matter how limiting, is neurologically comfortable. It is predictable. It requires no new coordination. A new image, however, demands change, and change creates friction. So the mind does what it has been trained to do. It retreats. It returns to old thoughts, old behaviors, old explanations. This is why people say things like, "I tried visualizing. It didn't work. I believed for a while. Then reality hit. Maybe it's not meant for me." What they are really saying is this: I saw it, but I couldn't hold it under pressure. Because holding an image requires emotional regulation, not imagination. It requires the ability to feel discomfort without collapsing inward, to observe doubt without obeying it, to allow uncertainty without reaching for distraction. Most people were never trained to do this. They were trained to react. From childhood, reaction was rewarded. Emotion was reinforced. Immediate response became survival. So, when a future image creates inner tension, the system panics. The mind scrambles for relief, scrolling, complaining, explaining, blaming, anything to release the pressure. And in releasing the pressure, the image is lost. This is why motivation fades so quickly. Motivation is emotional energy. It spikes, then crashes. It was never designed to hold direction. That is why relying on motivation guarantees inconsistency. True alignment is quiet. It does not shout. It does not rush. It does not demand proof. It holds. This is also why most people misunderstand visualization. They think visualization is about intensity, about feeling more, about excitement. But excitement destabilizes. Calmness stabilizes. The people who actually change their lives are not emotionally high. They are internally ordered. They can hold a picture without needing to talk about it. They can move toward it without needing encouragement. They can tolerate boredom, delay, and silence. This is not talent. It is training. And most people never train the mind to remain steady. They train it to escape discomfort. So the moment discomfort appears, and it always does, the image dissolves. Another reason people lose the image is comparison. They look around and measure progress externally. They see others moving faster. They see no immediate evidence. They begin negotiating with reality. Comparison shifts attention outward, and the moment attention leaves the inner image, it weakens. An image only survives when it is fed by attention, not obsession, not pressure, consistency. This is why night listening matters. When the conscious mind relaxes, the defensive mechanisms soften. The nervous system enters a receptive state. Repetition begins to rewire response patterns. The image no longer feels foreign. It begins to feel familiar. And familiarity reduces fear. This is the real purpose of repetition. Not to convince the mind, but to calm it. Because a calm mind does not abandon direction. It stays. It doesn't argue with the present. It doesn't demand immediate confirmation. It continues quietly. And quiet continuation is unstoppable. Most people quit internally long before they quit externally. They may still show up physically, but the image is gone. And without the image, behavior becomes mechanical, disconnected. weak. This is why effort without vision exhausts people. Effort with a stable image energizes. The body obeys the mind, but only when the mind is consistent. So the first discipline is not action. It is image retention. Can you hold a future picture without reacting to current discomfort? Can you stay aligned when nothing is changing? Yet can you resist the urge to explain, justify, or abandon? These are not motivational questions. They are structural ones. Because the mind does not manifest what it desires. It manifests what it returns to, over and over. Most people return to fear, to limitation, to the familiar. A few return to the image, quietly, calmly, without drama. And over time, something remarkable happens. The image stops feeling like imagination. It starts feeling like direction. Decisions align without force. Habits reorganize naturally. Opportunities appear without being chased. Not because the universe was convinced, but because the person stopped changing direction. This is the law most people never learn. You don't need to believe harder. You need to stop leaving the image. This chapter is not here to inspire you. It is here to clarify the real work. Because until you understand why the image disappears, you will keep blaming yourself, or worse, blaming the principle. In the next chapter, we will go deeper. We will uncover what imagination truly is and why it was never meant to be fantasy. It is instruction, and when followed correctly, it leads exactly where it points. Most people were taught the wrong relationship with imagination. They were told it was childish, unrealistic, a distraction from real life. So they learned to treat imagination as entertainment, something you visit briefly, then abandon. That misunderstanding alone has quietly limited millions of lives. Because imagination was never meant to be fantasy. It is instruction. Every meaningful creation in human history began as an internal image that did not yet exist in the external world. Not a wish, not a hope, a direction. Imagination is the mind's ability to simulate a future state before the body moves toward it. It is not random. It is not accidental. And it is not neutral. The image you hold becomes the reference point for every decision you make, whether you are aware of it or not. This is where things become uncomfortable for many people. Because even those who claim they don't imagine much are constantly imagining. They imagine things going wrong, being embarrassed, running out of time, staying stuck, failing again. Those images feel practical, not imaginative, but they are still images. And the body obeys them just as faithfully. Imagination is always active. The only question is whether you are directing it or letting it run on autopilot. This is why imagination must be understood as instruction. The nervous system does not distinguish between an image you consciously choose and one you unconsciously repeat. It simply prepares the body to respond. If the image is threat-based, the body contracts. If the image is expansive, the body organizes forward. Posture changes, breathing changes, decision-making shifts. Not symbolically, biologically. This is why some people walk into rooms already defeated without anything having happened yet. They are obeying an internal image they did not choose. And this is also why others remain steady under pressure. They are obeying a different image. Not louder, not more emotional, just clearer. The problem is that most people try to use imagination as motivation. They visualize to feel good. But feeling good is not the goal. Stability is. Imagination becomes powerful only when it is quietly rehearsed, not emotionally forced. Forced imagination creates tension. Tension collapses consistency. That is why hyped visualization rarely lasts. The body senses strain and pulls away. But when imagination is calm, repeated, and familiar, the nervous system accepts it as direction rather than fantasy. This is where instruction begins. Think of imagination as a blueprint. A blueprint does not build the house, but without it, the house cannot exist. The blueprint tells every system what to do next. Muscle, attention, time, energy. Without a blueprint, effort scatters. With one, effort organizes itself. This is why people with clear inner images often seem lucky. They are not reacting to life. They are responding to instruction. Their decisions are not heroic. They are coherent. And coherence compounds. Another critical misunderstanding: imagination does not work through force. It works through repetition without argument. The mind accepts what is familiar, not what is loud. This is why repetition matters more than intensity. A quiet image returned to every day has more power than a dramatic visualization done once. Repetition teaches the subconscious what matters, and the subconscious controls far more than conscious intention. It governs habit selection, attention filtering, emotional response, impulse timing. In other words, IT challenges. It governs behavior. This is why imagination is not separate from action. It precedes it. The body moves toward what the subconscious has accepted as direction. When imagination is inconsistent, behavior becomes conflicted. When imagination is steady, behavior simplifies. You don't need to force yourself. You don't need to argue. You don't need to motivate. You simply do what aligns. This is the moment imagination stops feeling mystical and starts feeling practical. You realize, I'm not trying to attract something. I'm training my system to move toward it. This also explains why imagination without discipline fails. If the image changes daily, the system never locks on. It stays confused. Confusion drains energy. That is why many people feel tired without doing much. Their inner direction keeps shifting. Imagination used correctly creates internal economy. Less friction, less hesitation, less self-negotiation. The system knows where it's going. And when the system knows, it conserves energy. This is why the most effective people often appear calm. They are not fighting themselves. Their imagination is aligned with their behavior. This chapter marks a turning point in understanding. Imagination is not about dreaming harder. It is about choosing a direction and returning to it. Again, and again, and again. Not emotionally, neutrally, like setting a compass. When storms come, you don't change direction, you adjust movement. This is how imagination becomes instruction rather than escape. And this is also why imagination must be protected. Not from others, but from internal noise. Doubt, urgency, comparison, impatience. These don't destroy imagination directly. They distract attention away from it. And attention is the fuel. Where attention goes consistently, behavior follows. This is why the coming chapters matter. Because seeing the image is not enough. Understanding imagination is not enough. The real work begins when you learn how to hold the image without interference. In the next chapter, we will focus on that exact skill, the rare one. The one that separates people who imagine their future from those who eventually live it. Not by force, but by steadiness. Seeing the image is easy. Holding it is rare. This is the distinction that quietly separates people who change their lives from people who only think about changing their lives. An image that appears briefly has no power. It excites the mind, then fades. An image that is held calmly, consistently, without argument, becomes a directive. And directives shape behavior. Most people believe the challenge is to believe more. It isn't. Belief strengthens after consistency, not before it. The real challenge is tolerance. Can you tolerate the gap between the image and the evidence? Can you remain internally aligned while the external world remains unchanged? This gap is where almost everyone loses the image. Because the gap is uncomfortable. It contains uncertainty, silence, delay, and the human nervous system dislikes all three. When the image is new, it creates internal tension. Not because it's wrong, but because it conflicts with the old identity. Your current identity is a set of neurological patterns, thought loops, emotional reactions, habits of response. A new image threatens those patterns. So the system resists. It sends doubt, urgency, rationalizations, not to harm you, but to preserve what it knows. This is why holding the image requires emotional neutrality, not excitement, not desperation, neutrality. When you attach strong emotion to the image, you make it fragile. Emotion fluctuates. Calm does not. A calm image does not need protection. It does not need defense. It does not react to contradiction. It simply stays. This is why the people who eventually hold it in their hand are not the loudest. They are not constantly affirming. They are not convincing others. They are internally consistent. Consistency is invisible from the outside, but unmistakable in its effects. Another reason people lose the image is mental bargaining. They hold it conditionally. I'll believe it if things improve. I'll stay aligned if I see progress. I'll commit once I'm sure. But certainty never comes first. It emerges after stability. Conditional holding dissolves under pressure. Unconditional holding endures. This does not mean blind faith. It means direction without negotiation. You do not argue with the compass when the terrain is difficult. You adjust steps, not direction. Holding the image is the same. You adapt tactics. You refine approach. But the image remains untouched. This is where identity begins to shift. Because identity is not what you say you are. It is what you remain aligned with when no one is reinforcing it. If you hold the image long enough, something subtle happens. Your choices begin to change before you consciously decide to change them. You say no more easily. Avoid certain environments. Gravitate towards structure. Tolerate less chaos. Not because you're forcing discipline, but because the image no longer tolerates misalignment. This is when holding the image becomes effortless. Not because the work ends, but because friction drops. This is also when external reality begins responding. Not dramatically, subtly. Conversations shift. Timing improves. Opportunities appear without being chased. Not because the universe was impressed, but because your behavior has stabilized. Stability is attractive. People trust it. Situations align with it. Instability repels. Holding the image creates predictability of character. And predictability is power. Another key point. Holding the image does not mean ignoring reality. It means not letting reality redefine direction. You acknowledge facts without surrendering orientation. Most people confuse realism with resignation. They say, "I'm just being realistic." But realism without direction is drift. True realism observes conditions while maintaining internal order. This is why holding the image requires silence. Not externally, internally. You stop narrating your process. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop explaining. Explanation weakens direction. Silence strengthens it. When you no longer need to justify the image, it becomes real to you. And what is real to you governs action. This chapter is not teaching visualization. It is teaching containment. The ability to contain an image without letting doubt leak energy from it. Containment is the skill no one talks about, but it is the one that decides outcomes. You do not manifest what you imagine. You manifest what you hold. Holding is not effortful. It is steady. It is the refusal to abandon direction when there is no applause. This is why night listening is effective. In low stimulation states, the mind stops arguing. The image settles. It becomes less exciting and more stable. And stability is what reality responds to. In the next chapter, we will address the most common threat to holding the image: emotion. Not negative emotion. All emotion. Because emotion, when unmanaged, destabilizes alignment. Understanding this is crucial, because the image does not disappear because you're weak. It disappears because emotion hijacks attention, and attention is everything. We will slow this down, and when you understand it, holding the image will no longer feel like work. It will feel like orientation. Emotion is not the enemy of being human, but emotion is the enemy of long-term vision. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in personal transformation, and that is exactly why it is rarely spoken plainly. Not because it is wrong, but because it contradicts the modern obsession with hype, motivation, and high vibration. The image in your mind is not destroyed by negative thinking. It is destroyed by emotional volatility. Intensity is the problem. Extreme excitement burns the image too fast. Extreme fear suffocates it. Extreme hope makes it fragile. Extreme disappointment dissolves it. The issue is not bad emotions versus good emotions. The issue is instability. Manifestation does not respond to emotional spikes. It responds to nervous system stability. An image can move from mind to hand only when your system no longer interprets it as a threat. And strong emotion is interpreted as danger. Why emotion destroys the image? Your brain was not designed to create the future. It was designed to survive the present. When you hold a new image, greater wealth, freedom, clarity, authority, your nervous system does not see opportunity. It sees risk. Risk of losing what is familiar. Risk of abandoning the current identity. Risk of stepping into uncertainty. Emotion rises as a defense mechanism, not to stop your growth, but to preserve what already exists. Every emotional surge is the system asking, "Are you sure this is safe?" When you let emotion dictate action, you answer, "No, it isn't." And the system responds by dismantling the image. This is why people abandon visions they truly want. Not because they lack belief, but because their system never stabilized. Calm is what holds the image. This is where maturity begins. Immature minds need emotion to believe, need motivation to act, need external reassurance to continue. Mature minds act without emotional permission, hold direction without evidence, refuse to negotiate with mood, not because they feel less, but because they are not ruled by feeling. Emotion is allowed to exist. It is not allowed to steer. Emotion may sit in the passenger seat. It never touches the wheel. Manifestation does not require stronger belief. It requires greater calm. A calm image does not demand defense. It does not require explanation. It does not react to contradiction. It simply stays. And what stays long enough becomes real. The biggest trap: using emotion to manifest. Many people make the same mistake. They assume more emotion equals more attraction. Stronger feeling equals faster results. Constant excitement equals alignment. This works briefly, then it collapses. Emotion is fire. Fire is useful for ignition, but disastrous for long-term structure. The image does not need ignition. It needs containment. When emotion leads one day, you are convinced. The next day you doubt. Then you abandon the image. Then you start again. This loop exhausts the system, and exhaustion kills vision. The problem was never belief. It was emotional oscillation. Calm power is the real force. Calm power is invisible. It does not announce itself. It does not stimulate dopamine. But it does not collapse. Calm power looks like seeing the image without excitement, facing delay without panic, experiencing doubt without retreat, continuing without narration. You are not suppressing emotion. You are not identifying with it. Emotion appears. You observe it. Emotion fades. The image remains. This is rare skill. And this is why quiet people go far. Silent builders surprise the world. Those who do not explain often win. How emotion actually destroys manifestation. Very specifically: 1. Emotion makes you speak too early. The image becomes polluted by opinions. 2. Emotion demands fast results. Delay triggers disappointment. 3. Emotion creates comparison. The image loses its uniqueness. 4. Emotion drives excessive action. Burnout poisons the vision. 5. Emotion interprets obstacles personally. Maybe this isn't for me. All of this originates from one failure: lack of calm containment. The correct relationship with emotion, not suppression, not forced positivity, but rules. Do not decide when emotion is high. Do not conclude when emotion is low. Do not change direction during emotional movement. Emotion is weather powers. Vision is navigation. No serious traveler changes direction because of rain. Why this matters for night listening. At night, dopamine lowers defense mechanisms, soften, the mind stops arguing, the nervous system slows, the image enters without friction. Night listening is not for excitement. It is for stabilization. A stable image embeds. An excited image evaporates. What embeds becomes default. What becomes default becomes behavior. What becomes behavior becomes reality. The truth most people avoid. You do not need more emotion. You need less emotional control over your direction. Not numbness. Not detachment. But composure. The image survives through steadiness, silence, non-reaction. This is not social media manifestation. This is adult manifestation. In the next chapter, we move deeper, because once emotion is governed, another force emerges, identity. Identity always forms before results appear. Not acting as if, not pretending, but a quiet, irreversible shift in how you respond to life. And when identity changes, results follow automatically. Results never arrive first. They confirm what has already changed. This is one of the most difficult truths for the mind to accept, because the mind is trained to believe in evidence before alignment. But reality does not work that way. Reality responds to identity. And identity always changes quietly, internally, long before it produces anything visible. This is why most people say, "I'll believe it when I see it," and why nothing ever changes. Those who transform live by a different law. I see it because I have already become it, not as fantasy, not as performance, but as internal orientation. Identity is not what you claim. It's how you respond. Identity is not your affirmations. It is not your vision board. It is not what you tell others. Identity is revealed in how you respond to delay, how you handle boredom, how you behave when no one is watching, what you tolerate without complaint. This is why results lag. Because the world waits for consistency of identity, not momentary intention. You can visualize wealth perfectly and still respond like someone who does not expect it. Reality listens to response, not imagination alone. Why people misunderstand, act as if. They imagine dressing differently, talking differently, performing confidence, mimicking success. That is not identity change. That is performance. And performance collapses under pressure. True identity shift is subtle. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It does not feel dramatic. It feels normal. When identity changes, behavior changes without effort. You stop negotiating with distractions. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing reassurance. Not because you're trying to be disciplined, but because your internal standards have changed. This is the key difference. Discipline imposed from outside is exhausting. Discipline generated by identity is effortless. Identity precedes evidence by necessity. If identity required evidence to change, no one would ever evolve. Because evidence only arrives after alignment. Think about it clearly. If confidence only appeared after success, no one would ever take a risk. If calm only appeared after safety, no one would survive uncertainty. If discipline only appeared after results, no skill would ever be mastered. Identity must shift in advance. This is not faith in fantasy. This is alignment with cause and effect. The inner world sets the pattern. The outer world follows the pattern. Always. What identity change actually looks like. Identity change does not feel like excitement. It feels like fewer emotional reactions, less need to explain, slower decisions, higher tolerance for silence. You don't suddenly feel powerful. You feel less reactive. And that is power. You stop rushing, forcing, comparing, overcorrecting. And you start choosing rhythm, choosing restraint, choosing consistency, choosing simplicity. These choices are invisible to others, but reality notices. Because reality responds to predictability. A stable identity produces stable signals, and stability attracts opportunity. Why results delay after identity shifts? This is where many people sabotage themselves. They begin changing internally. They become calmer, more grounded, more disciplined. But because results don't appear immediately, they panic. They think nothing is happening. So they abandon the new identity and return to old reactions. This resets the process. Reality requires confirmation time. It tests, is this identity stable? Or is it temporary? Will this person revert under pressure? Only when identity remains consistent through boredom, delay, and silence does reality reorganize. This is not punishment. It is verification. Identity is a signal, not a statement. Reality does not hear words. It reads behavior, not loud behavior, repeated behavior. How you wake up, how you structure time, how you respond to friction, how you speak when challenged. These are identity signals, and they compound. When signals become consistent, results become inevitable. This is why some people appear lucky. They are not lucky. They are internally coherent. The danger of chasing results too early. When you chase results before identity stabilizes, you create contradiction. You say, I want this life, but you behave like someone who doubts it. Reality does not reward desire. It rewards congruence. Incongruence delays outcomes. Congruence accelerates them. This is why forcing action without identity alignment leads to burnout. You are pushing behavior uphill without internal gravity supporting it. Identity change reverses gravity. Action becomes downhill. Night listening and identity formation. This is where night listening becomes powerful. At night, the ego relaxes. The need to perform fades, resistance lowers. The mind absorbs identity cues, not instructions, not motivation, but orientation. You don't try to become someone else. You acclimate. The new identity begins to feel familiar. And what feels familiar becomes default. When identity becomes default, behavior follows automatically. No effort, no force. The quiet sign identity has shifted. Here is the signal most people miss. You stop arguing internally. No debate. No justification. No self-convincing. You simply do less that contradicts your direction. This is the moment results are already guaranteed, even if nothing visible has changed yet. Because reversal no longer occurs. Identity is the real manifestation. Manifestation is not visualizing outcomes. It is becoming the person for whom the outcome is normal. Normal, not exciting. When wealth feels normal, it arrives. When calm feels normal, chaos recedes. When discipline feels normal, progress compounds. Normality is the threshold. If you understand only one thing, let it be this: results do not create identity. Identity creates results. Not overnight, not dramatically, but inevitably. You do not need to act confident. You need to stop reacting insecurely. You do not need to pretend success. You need to stop behaving like delay is danger. Identity shifts first. Results follow. Always. In the next chapter, we will reveal the invisible mechanism that locks identity into place. Repetition. Repetition. Not repetition for motivation. Not repetition for belief. Repetition for stability. Because what repeats quietly becomes permanent. Nothing becomes real through intensity. Everything becomes real through repetition. This is the mechanism most people underestimate, dismiss, or misunderstand. They assume repetition is for learning, for memory, for discipline. That is surface-level thinking. Repetition does not exist to convince the conscious mind. It exists to retrain the subconscious. And the subconscious is the one that runs behavior, attention, and reaction, until repetition reshapes it. Nothing truly changes. Why insight alone changes nothing? Many people understand the ideas. They can explain manifestation. They can quote principles. They feel inspired while listening. And yet, their life remains unchanged. Why? Because insight without repetition does not alter defaults. Your subconscious does not respond to understanding. It responds to familiarity. Whatever is repeated becomes familiar. Whatever is familiar becomes safe. Whatever is safe becomes automatic. This is law. Repetition is not for belief. It is for stability. Most people repeat affirmations trying to believe harder. That is the wrong objective. Belief is unstable. Belief fluctuates with mood, evidence, and emotion. Stability does not. Repetition creates stability. When something is repeated without emotional charge, the nervous system stops resisting it. It no longer triggers fear. It no longer demands proof. It simply integrates. This is why repetition works best when it is calm, neutral, consistent, not emotional, not dramatic. Quiet repetition outperforms passionate affirmation every time. Night listening and subconscious imprinting. Night listening is powerful because it bypasses the critical mind. At night, dopamine lowers, analytical resistance drops, identity softens. The mind stops arguing. Information enters as orientation, not instruction. You are not trying to change. You are absorbing rhythm. And rhythm is what the subconscious obeys. This is why people notice changes without effort. Reduced overthinking, calmer reactions, clearer priorities. Not because they tried harder, but because repetition rewired defaults. Why repetition must be boring. This will challenge many people. If repetition excites you, it will not last. Excitement demands novelty. Novelty disrupts consistency. Repetition works only when it becomes boring. Boredom signals integration. The moment you no longer feel a reaction, the message has begun embedding. This is why repetition must be simple. Same voice, same tone, same phrases, same timing. The subconscious does not need variation. It needs reliability. Repetition shapes identity silently. Identity is not changed by decisions. It is changed by patterns. Patterns emerge through repetition. When you hear the same orientation nightly, the same standard, the same emotional tone, the same behavioral expectation, your nervous system begins to align. You start behaving differently without noticing. You stop certain habits without forcing. You tolerate less chaos. You require less stimulation. This is identity formation. Quiet, undramatic, irreversible. Why people quit before repetition works? Most people stop repeating too early. They say, "I already know this. I've heard this before." It's not doing anything. These thoughts are the final defense of the old identity. The moment repetition threatens replacement, the mind becomes bored, irritated, dismissive. This is not failure. This is resistance. If you stop here, nothing changes. If you continue, identity shifts. Repetition works after boredom, not before. Repetition must be rhythmic, not obsessive. This is important. Repetition is not looping all day. It is not mental chanting. It is not forcing thoughts. That creates fatigue. Repetition works when it is scheduled, contained, predictable. One session, same time, same structure. Then release. The subconscious needs rhythm, not pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Rhythm creates acceptance. Repetition replaces willpower. Willpower is a temporary resource. Repetition eliminates the need for it. When repetition has done its work, discipline feels natural. Focus feels easier. Distraction loses appeal, not because you're stronger, but because the system no longer negotiates. This is the highest form of power. When effort disappears, the invisible hand effect, you will not feel repetition working. That is the point. One day, you will notice a calmer response, a better decision, a quieter confidence, and you won't know where it came from. That is repetition. It operates below awareness. By the time you notice results, the change already happened. Why repetition must precede manifestation? Manifestation does not respond to desire. It responds to habitual orientation. Repetition creates that orientation. Without repetition, identity remains theoretical. With repetition, identity becomes factual. Reality responds to facts. Do not look for emotional confirmation. Do not wait for excitement. Repeat calmly. Repeat consistently. Repeat even when it feels empty. Especially then. Because repetition does not need belief. It creates belief as a side effect. What repeats quietly becomes permanent. In the next chapter, we will explore why silence accelerates manifestation faster than affirmation, faster than declaration, faster than explanation. Because what you do not say often determines what becomes real. Most people slow down their own progress the moment they begin talking about it. They speak too early. They explain too much. They seek confirmation before the foundation is stable, and without realizing it, they leak the very energy they are trying to build. Silence is not weakness. Silence is containment. And containment is what allows something to grow. Why speaking collapses the image. An image held internally has coherence. The moment you speak it out loud too often, it becomes exposed to other people's doubt, other people's projections, other people's misunderstanding. Even supportive reactions can destabilize it, because the subconscious does not distinguish between encouragement and interference. It only registers noise, and noise fragments focus. This is why ancient traditions emphasized secrecy, why initiations were private, why real transformation happened away from crowds, not for mystery, for protection. Silence preserves internal order. Manifestation requires order. Order is fragile in the early stages. When you talk about your vision, you trigger emotional spikes. You invite comparison. You activate ego. Emotion destabilizes rhythm. Ego demands validation. Validation creates dependency, and dependency dissolves internal authority. Silence prevents all three. Silence keeps the system neutral, and neutrality allows alignment to stabilize. Why silence is not hiding. This is important. Silence is not fear. Silence is not insecurity. Silence is strategy. You are not hiding because you are unsure. You are quiet because the process is still forming. A seed does not announce itself underground. Roots grow in darkness. Only what is mature enough appears above the surface. Silence removes the need for approval. When you speak your goal, part of you waits for reaction. A nod, a compliment, a scene. That creates a subtle loop. Speak, seek approval, adjust identity. This loop keeps you externally oriented. Manifestation requires internal orientation. Silence breaks the loop. When no one knows what you're building, you stop performing. You stop defending. You stop explaining. You act more cleanly. Decisions become simpler. Energy stops leaking. Silence sharpens focus. The less you speak, the more attention consolidates inward. Thought becomes clearer. Emotion calms. Imagination stabilizes. This is not mystical. It is neurological. Every explanation reactivates the analytical mind. Every explanation reopens doubt. Silence keeps the mind in execution mode. Why the most powerful phase is invisible. There is a phase in every real transformation where nothing looks impressive. No announcements. No results to show. No recognition. This phase is critical because it is where identity detaches from appearance. You are no longer doing things to be seen. You are doing them because they are aligned. This is where real confidence forms. Not loud confidence. Quiet certainty. Silence trains emotional self-control. When you stop talking about your plans, you stop emotionally rehearsing outcomes. You stop fantasizing about reactions. You stop oscillating between hope and disappointment. The nervous system settles, and a calm nervous system holds images longer. This is why silence accelerates manifestation. Less emotional interference, less internal argument, less identity fluctuation. Calm allows consistency. Consistency creates results. Silence eliminates premature closure. When people talk too much, they feel done before they are. The brain rewards expression as completion. You talk about the goal, and the system relaxes as if progress was made. This is dangerous. Silence keeps the system hungry. It keeps momentum intact. Nothing feels finished until it is finished. Silence aligns action with intention. When no one is watching, you act more honestly. You choose what actually matters, not what looks good. You stop chasing symbols. You start building substance. This alignment compounds quietly, and when results finally appear, they feel inevitable, not surprising. When to speak and when not to. Speak only when action is complete. Structure is stable. Identity no longer depends on reaction. Until then, do not explain. Do not announce. Do not seek reassurance. Silence is not passive. It is focused stillness. If you want speed, reduce noise. If you want stability, contain the image. If you want manifestation, protect the process. Speak less. Hold more. Let the work happen where no one sees it, because what grows quietly lasts longer. In the next chapter, we will explore how identity forms before evidence appears, and why results always arrive after the inner shift, never before. Discipline does not create success. That is the misunderstanding. Discipline creates protection. And protection is what allows the image you hold in your mind to survive long enough to become real. Most people lose their vision not because it was wrong, not because it was unrealistic, but because it was unprotected. Why the image collapses without discipline. The image in your mind is fragile in the beginning, not because it is weak, but because your environment is strong. Daily life constantly applies pressure, distractions, emotional reactions, social influence, fatigue, doubt, disguised as logic, without discipline. The image is repeatedly interrupted. Interrupted images dissolve. Discipline does not push you forward. It keeps you from drifting backward. Discipline is not hustle. It is containment. Most people associate discipline with force, pushing harder, doing more, grinding. That is not the discipline that protects the image. Protective discipline is quiet. It looks like showing up at the same time, repeating the same practice, avoiding unnecessary stimulation, not reacting to temporary moods. This discipline does not exhaust you. It stabilizes you. The real function of discipline. Discipline exists to answer one question. What do you do when nothing is happening? When there are no signs, no feedback, no reward? That is when most people break alignment. They start scrolling. They start comparing. They start doubting. Discipline says, nothing needs to change. Stay here. That is protection. Why discipline must be boring. If discipline feels exciting, it will not last. Excitement is emotional. Emotion fluctuates. Protection requires predictability. The discipline that protects the image is repetitive, neutral, and uneventful. Same time, same action, same restraint. The subconscious trusts what is boring. Boredom signals safety. Safety allows integration. Discipline keeps the image intact during chaos. Life will test alignment, unexpected events, delays, contradictory evidence. Without discipline, you reinterpret the image every time something happens. With discipline, you don't. You keep the image untouched while reality reorganizes. This is maturity. Not reacting does not mean ignoring reality. It means not letting reality reprogram you. Discipline replaces motivation. Motivation asks, "How do I feel today?" Discipline asks, "What stays the same, no matter what?" Motivation fluctuates with dopamine. Discipline operates without chemistry. That is why discipline protects the image better than belief. Belief argues. Discipline continues. Why discipline is invisible from the outside. No one sees discipline. There is nothing to post, nothing to explain, nothing to celebrate. This invisibility is an advantage. The image grows without interference. No opinions, no projections, no energy leakage, just quiet consistency. Discipline prevents self-sabotage. Most sabotage is subtle, not dramatic failure, small deviations. Skipping once, checking too much, explaining too early, changing direction slightly. Discipline stops these leaks. It says, "Do not touch the image." And over time, the image becomes stable enough that it no longer needs protection. When discipline becomes identity. At first, discipline feels intentional. Later, it feels natural. You no longer resist it. You no longer negotiate. This is the moment discipline stops being effort and starts being identity. At that point, success is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you allow. Discipline will not make you rich. It will not make you successful. It will not make you special. But it will protect the image long enough for reality to align with it. And alignment always wins. In the next chapter, we will explore why reality eventually aligns with consistency, why force is unnecessary, and why staying in direction matters more than speed. Because when you stop changing direction, reality has no choice but to follow. Reality is slower than emotion, slower than thought, slower than desire. And this delay is where most people lose trust. They assume nothing is happening. But alignment is never instant. It is inevitable if direction does not change. Why reality always lags behind the mind? The mind moves instantly. A decision is immediate. An image forms in seconds. Belief can shift in a moment. Reality cannot do that. Reality reorganizes through layers, habits, systems, environments, people, timing. It moves through sequence, not impulse. This lag is not resistance. It is translation. The mistake people make during the gap between image and result. There is a gap. This gap feels uncomfortable. Nothing is visible. Nothing confirms progress. Most people respond by forcing action, changing strategy, doubting the image, looking for signs. This is where alignment breaks. Not because reality said no, but because the person changed direction. Consistency is stronger than intensity. Reality does not respond to emotional peaks. It responds to patterns. One intense week means nothing. 10 calm. Identical weeks mean everything. Consistency tells reality, this is not temporary. Reality only aligns with what appears permanent. if you change often. Reality waits. If you stay, reality moves. Why you don't need to convince the world. When alignment is real, you stop explaining. You don't persuade. You don't argue. You don't defend the image. Explanation is a form of doubt. Consistency speaks louder than clarity. Reality doesn't need your reasons. It responds to repetition. The silent shift that happens first. Before external results appear, internal friction disappears. You notice less urgency, less comparison, less emotional reaction, less need to figure it out. This calm is not stagnation. It is synchronization. Reality is catching up. Why forcing delays? Alignment force introduces noise. When you push too hard, you act out of impatience. You react to surface problems. You override intuition. This creates mixed signals. Reality responds best to clean input, clear image, stable behavior, minimal reaction, no force required. Consistency trains the environment. Your environment watches before it responds. People adjust slowly. Opportunities appear indirectly. Systems rearrange quietly. Sudden change creates resistance. Gradual consistency creates cooperation. Reality aligns when it trusts. You will not revert. You don't need signs. Signs come later. Looking for signs is a sign of doubt. Alignment happens first, without evidence. Then suddenly conversations shift. Timing improves. Doors open naturally. Resistance disappears. These are not miracles. They are delayed confirmations. The illusion of doing nothing. From the outside, consistency looks passive. Inside, it is disciplined restraint. Not reacting. Not pivoting. Not chasing validation. This restraint allows momentum to build underneath, like tectonic plates, invisible until unstoppable. When reality starts mirroring you, one day, without drama, you notice things feel easier. Decisions face less resistance. People respond differently. Not because you changed tactics, but because reality adjusted its tone. This is alignment. Not sudden success. Not explosion. Just coherence. Why alignment feels anticlimactic. Movies teach us to expect fireworks. Reality doesn't do that. When alignment arrives, it feels obvious. You don't celebrate wildly. You don't feel shocked. You think, of course. That feeling means the image has fully integrated. The final test before alignment completes, right before results appear. There is often boredom. Nothing excites you. Nothing feels dramatic. This is dangerous for undisciplined minds. They mistake boredom for failure. In truth, boredom means the image no longer needs emotional fuel. Reality is already moving. The only rule you must follow. You do not need belief every day. You do not need motivation. You do not need confidence. You need directional integrity. Do not change direction. That is all. Reality cannot resist a direction that does not change. Reality is not stubborn. It is methodical. It does not respond to urgency. It responds to stability. Stay consistent. Stay quiet. Stay aligned. In the next chapter, We will talk about what happens when you finally hold it in your hand, why there is no celebration, no shock, and no urge to explain. Because the final confirmation of alignment is not excitement. It is recognition. When it finally happens, it does not feel like victory. There is no rush of emotion, no disbelief, no urge to announce it to the world. Instead, there is a quiet recognition, a feeling that says, yes, this is exactly how it was supposed to happen. Why success feels strangely ordinary. Most people imagine success as a dramatic moment, a peak, a breakthrough, a sudden transformation. But real manifestation does not arrive like a surprise. It arrives like confirmation. By the time it appears in your hands, you have already lived with it in your mind for so long that reality is simply catching up. That is why there is no shock. The mind says, I've been here before. You don't celebrate because nothing feels new externally. Everything has changed. Internally, nothing has. You do not feel larger. You do not feel superior. You do not feel successful. You feel aligned. The identity that once felt imagined now feels normal. This is why people who truly manifest do not boast. They are not impressed. They already adjusted to this version of themselves long ago. Why there is no urge to explain your journey when something feels fragile. We talk about it. When something feels solid, we protect it with silence. At this stage, you stop explaining how long it took, how hard it was, how many setbacks you endured, not because you forgot the struggle, but because explanation belongs to the past version of you. The current version does not need justification. The difference between achievement and embodiment. Achievement is external. Embodiment is internal. Most people chase achievement without ever embodying the identity required to hold it. That is why they lose it. By the time you hold it in your hand, you are no longer trying to become that person. You already are. And reality simply reflects that fact. Why excitement would actually feel wrong. Excessive excitement signals instability. It means something feels temporary. When something is truly yours, the nervous system remains calm. No rush, no adrenaline, no fear of loss, just grounded presence. This calm is the real proof. You realize the comeback never existed. Here is the paradox. You think you made a comeback. But standing here, you realize something deeper. You did not return to who you were. You replaced who you were. The old self would not even recognize this life. So this was never a comeback. It was a transition. Why? You don't rush to enjoy it. You don't squeeze the moment. You don't cling to the outcome. You don't need to extract happiness from it. Because happiness is no longer tied to results. It is tied to alignment. This is why peace replaces excitement. And peace is far more powerful. The strange disappearance of desire. One of the most confusing moments is this. The desire that once drove you no longer burns the same way. Not because you lost ambition, but because desire has completed its function. It pulled you into alignment. Now it dissolves. And what remains is clarity. Why others don't react the way you expected. Some people won't notice. Some will downplay it. Some will suddenly respect you. Some will distance themselves. None of it matters. Because their reaction is irrelevant to your internal state. You are no longer measuring yourself through external reflection. That need died during the process. The quiet confidence that replaces validation. Confidence no longer announces itself. It becomes still. You speak less. You react slower. You choose more carefully. Not because you are cautious, but because nothing feels urgent anymore. Urgency belonged to the version of you that needed proof. You understand why timing could not be faster. Looking back, you see it clearly. If this had arrived earlier, you would have mishandled it. If it had arrived later, you would have outgrown the desire. The timing was exact, not convenient. Exact. This realization removes all resentment toward the past. Nothing was wasted. Why you don't fear losing it. Fear disappears when identity stabilizes. You know, even if this vanished tomorrow, you could recreate it. Because the image is no longer external. It lives inside you. That is true security. The most unexpected feeling, neutrality. There is a moment when you sit alone, holding what you once dreamed of. And instead of joy, you feel neutral, not empty. Neutral, balanced. This neutrality is power. It means you are no longer emotionally dependent on outcomes. You own them, they do not own you. When gratitude becomes silent, you are grateful. But you do not perform gratitude. There is no ritual, no announcement, no emotional display. Gratitude becomes behavior. How you move, how you treat time, how you protect your energy. This is mature gratitude. Why you don't rush into the next goal. The old you would immediately want more. The new you pauses, not out of fear, out of wisdom. You let the identity settle, because you understand something now. Results are easy to repeat. Identity is what takes time to integrate. The final realization, the greatest shift, is not what you gained. It is what you no longer need. You no longer need validation, reassurance, motivation, confirmation. You trust alignment. And trust is the highest form of power. When you finally hold it in your hand, you realize the goal was never the object. The goal was who you became while holding the image without proof. That discipline changed you permanently. Nothing can undo that. And that is why this is not the end. It is simply the moment you stop chasing and start living from alignment. In the outro, we will bring this full circle, not with inspiration, not with urgency, but with one final instruction. Stay in the work. The world will catch up. If you've listened all the way to this point, there is nothing left to convince you of. You already feel it. Not excitement, not hype, but a quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't need proof. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that stays. This message was never meant to motivate you. It was meant to realign you. Because the truth is this: if you can hold an image long enough without emotional reaction, without panic, without asking when, without looking for confirmation, then reality has no choice but to follow. Not because of magic, not because of luck, but because direction held consistently becomes law. Most people fail here, not because they lack imagination, but because they leak energy. They talk too soon. They react too fast. They look for signs instead of staying aligned. You didn't. You learned to hold the image quietly, to protect it with discipline, to let repetition do the work. That is why this is not about believing. It is about not interfering. So, here is the only instruction you need now. Stay in the work. Stay silent. Stay consistent. Do not rush the outcome. Do not announce progress. Do not check reality every day asking if it's working. It is working because you didn't quit holding direction. Let the world catch up at its own pace. This is why this audiobook is designed for night listening. Not to excite your conscious mind, but to stabilize your subconscious direction. If this message resonated with you, don't save it for later. Let it repeat. Play it again while you sleep. Let the ideas settle without effort. Let alignment become automatic. And if you want more content like this content that doesn't hype you up, but quietly rebuilds how you think, act, and choose subscribe to Sleep Success audiobook. Not for motivation, but for alignment. No noise, no rush, no pressure, just direction, held long enough, until reality has no option but to match it. Stay in the work. The world will catch up.